In this lesson, we will cover handling real estate transactions, which falls under Rule 520-1-.10. The first topic is presenting offers. When representing the seller or buyer, a licensee is obliged to present any signed offer to procure or lease the property. If the licensee receives an offer from someone they don't represent, a copy must be given to the licensee who represents that person. When preparing or signing an offer or brokerage engagement, the licensee has to include the license numbers of each firm and licensee. This must be the 6-digit number assigned by the commission. For example, the license number for the sales agents and brokerages must be included in the transaction documents. This also makes it easier for the clients to communicate with the commission if needed. A licensee has the responsibility to distribute all documents used in a real estate transaction to anyone who signs the document. A broker should keep copies of documents and records for 3 years. This includes brokerage engagements, sales contracts, leases, closing statements, and any documents for a real estate transaction. For example, Glenn Thomas is a broker who sold a house for the Houstons 2.5 years ago. Glenn must retain all documents related to the sale of the home for at least 6 more months. Here's another example. Tina Ray contracted Glenn to sell her home 2 years ago, but the home did not sell. Since Tina and Glenn signed a brokerage contract, that must be kept for another year to meet the requirements of this rule. The falsification of transaction documents is prohibited, as is misleading representatives. A licensee cannot falsify a record or knowingly allow a record to be falsified, either orally or in writing, by a third party. This rule covers the following misinformation: any amount other than the real lease, sales, or exchange price, any amount except the real down payment, any amount except the real security deposit, earnest money, or other funds, a payment of funds in cash when it was made in another form, any contrivance meant to deceive a buyer, seller, or lessee, or another licensee. The final section of this lesson covers disclosures of rebates, commissions, fees, and other considerations. First, any disclosures required by the OCGA by a licensee to a principal must be made prior to receiving payment of fees, rebates, and commissions. This applies to brokerage agreements, management agreements, and any other written real estate agreement. Second, in the case of a licensee who refers a principal to another licensee for real estate services due to relocation, the payment of fees, commissions, and other considerations shall be made known in writing to the principal by the date of closing on the sale, purchase, or exchange of property. Third, any disclosures required in the OCGA must adhere to the requirements of all federal laws regarding the payment or receipt of anything of value for referral services or products during a real estate transaction. Under this rule, the term licensee's principal refers to either a client or customer of a real estate broker, if the customer is primarily working with the licensee and not another broker or agent. Licensees can rebate any part of a fee, commission, or other compensation to a principal for services related to the sale, purchase, lease, or exchange of real estate. The rebate must be disclosed on the closing statement. The licensee cannot mislead another licensee, lender, principal title, or government entity regarding the source of money used to complete the real estate transaction. Also, no disclosure is required for products, services, gifts, or other consideration that a licensee gives a principal as long as these items aren't related to the real estate transaction. For example, sales agent Lisa Pringle sells the McDonald's home to a buyer that Lisa procured and that is related to Lisa. Lisa negotiated a $30,000 discount off the original sales price for motivated sellers. In exchange for the lower sales price, Lisa promises the McDonald's new living room furniture for another home she plans to sell to them. This is a violation of the rules for consideration, unless Lisa discloses it on the closing documents during the sale of the McDonald's house. This concludes the lesson on handling real estate transactions. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of the guidelines set forth in the Rule 5:51. We'll start this lesson by briefly discussing Rule 520-1-.11 regarding licensees acting as principals. Under this rule, sales agents and associate brokers have to notify their broker in writing of any property they are buying, selling, or exchanging if the licensee has a whole or partial ownership in the property. For example, Tessa Coventry owns 2 rental properties. She plans to list one for sale on the MLS. By law, Tessa must notify her broker that she plans to sell a property she owns. If a licensee makes an offer on a property as part of a brokerage engagement or an extension of an engagement, the terms and conditions of the engagement must be set down in a written contract. The same is true if the licensee buys one property to enable a client to buy another. For example, Kit Benning is a sales agent who decides to buy a property currently listed for her clients, the Winstons. Kit finds a home that the Winstons wish to purchase. While drawing up the sales contracts, she makes her purchase of the Winstons' home contingent on their extending the brokerage engagement by 60 days to allow time for the closing. This meets the requirements of the rule. Licensees advertising real property for themselves have to follow the advertising requirements set forth in Rule 520-1-.09. Next, we'll briefly cover Rule 520-1-.12 regarding business brokerage. According to the rule, a person who sells a business for a client must be a licensed real estate broker or sales agent. Unlicensed brokers aren't authorized to sell, negotiate, or secure prospects for available businesses in return for consideration. For example, Jacob Brown knows the owner of a restaurant in downtown Atlanta. The owner confides to Jake that she wants to sell her business. Luckily for the business owner, Jacob knows someone looking to buy an established restaurant. Jacob asks a real estate buddy to draw up the sales contract. Jacob asks for a commission since he was the procuring cause of the sale. However, Jacob doesn't have a real estate license in Georgia, so he isn't entitled to any commissions for the services of real estate. Finally, we'll discuss Rule 520-1-.13 regarding fair housing. According to the rule, licensees cannot discriminate against a prospective buyer or seller based on color, religion, sex, race, familial status, national origin, or handicap. They also cannot insinuate that any person moving into a geographic area might lower property values or change the makeup of the neighborhood based on a protected status. Also, licensees cannot state that any individual in a protected status would cause an increase in criminal activity or drag down the quality of area schools. For example, Rachel Rhodes is a sales agent in Savannah. She is showing homes to a Christian couple who inform her that they don't want to live in a neighborhood with Jewish residents. Rachel has to inform her clients that she cannot discriminate based on religion and will be unable to filter home searches to areas with a low percentage of Jewish residents. It is important to note that no licensee can refuse the right to purchase, sell, lease, or rent a property based on color, sex, national origin, race, religion, handicap, or familial status.